Welcome to this episode of the Down the Pub podcast. We've been off the air for a couple of weeks because I was away back home, and yeah, it's like it was good to get away, but I also missed seeing the Wanderers games in person. And somebody who did see them in person was Chris, who's with us. Chris is coming to hang out with me on this episode because Gary is getting married on the weekend. I was going to try and think of some disease, but I think that's just out of order since I was getting married. So congratulations to Gary. Yeah, Chris. How's it going, man? How are you? Good to be back.
I was gonna say, I don't know if there's much worse than marriage.
Yeah.
No, congratulations to Gary for sure. Welcome back to you, Anthony. And a quick apology too to the listeners. Me and Gary were gonna do a special while Anthony was away, but unfortunately, our lives kind of got in the way. Me and Gary tried to make things work, and it didn't really come together for uh, reasons uncontrolled. So we owe the listeners one, and I think me and Gary will probably throw one together when you and Sarah decide to have a date night one night down the road here.
Yeah, man, it's I totally get it. It's like, this is kind of a labor of love for all of us, and like family and friends and all that kind of stuff always comes first. So like it's not a big deal. Like, you try to get it together, but it's it takes a lot for me to get you two guys to actually say you're going to do stuff. So that's why I'm here. So all
Fair,
right,
fair.
yeah, so we've it's we're in do or die territory right now with the Wanderers, and we got to draw the point at the end of the other game when I was away, which I think we were very lucky to get. It wasn't one of our better performances. This, on the other hand, was probably one of our best performances of the season. I thought we were excellent for 75-80% of this game. Just before we kick into it, though, Chris, I just wanted to congratulate friend of the show, Maro Eustachio, who is helping out with the Canadian men's national team, which I think is a great initiative to have Canadian uh, Premier League coaches involved, and it's going to be weird, I'm sure, for him coaching his brother. But yeah, that was really neat that they did that. I also thought it was pretty funny that somebody from York put a York United sticker over the Wanderers badge on the sign, and yeah, I love that stuff, man. I think it's kind of funny. But yeah, the Wanderers were pretty quick about pulling that piece of shit off the sign. So yeah, I just love that kind of banter. So, and the fact that York actually had anybody here supporting them was an amazing achievement in itself. So congratulations to them. So coming into this game, as I mentioned with the Ottawa game, we were uh, we got a point which we desperately needed. This one, everybody's been kind of talking about our need to make sure that we get 3 points on this one. So, uh, how did you think the boys started out? How do you think about the formation that we had? And we just really seemed like we were on it from the get-go.
Yeah, formation wise, tactics wise, from the jump, like you said, that do or die mentality was showing itself, and that in itself, I think, is a plus and a positive in a season where we haven't been able to grab a lot of positives. We know this team has no quit, but when you have it kind of laying on the platter in front of you and you know what the goal is, sometimes it's hard to reach that. Sometimes that achievement is difficult to get through. It takes that extra little bit. And I'm really, really, really glad that we saw that extra little bit almost from minute number one. I think if there's one demerit on the season, for sure, it's been that we've had those slow starts. I've been that echo in the wind, if you will, that if we don't match the energy of the opponent from the start in this league, especially, you're behind, not even just a goal at times, but it'll feel like you're behind two or three just because the momentum in this league shows itself a lot more, I find, than in the general space of the sport. So from minute one, I was really, really happy to see that what I kind of saw as like a three-tiered formation was actually kind of overlapping and overlaying a little bit. We saw Riley getting forward
Yeah.
and Zach tucking in, and then we saw the opposite happening. So those early questions of the fullback swap, having them both inverted rather than with their strong foot on the outside. My curiosity peaked immediately, but to see how Jeremy and Rampy were kind of filling those spaces when those guys were getting forward. Lorenzo surprisingly was getting forward too into some attacking positions. We saw Patrice kind of flirt with him as a number 9 earlier in the year out of necessity, but yesterday, it kind of felt like it was more into the game plan and it actually looked a little more cohesive. I did like the fact that the supporters did seem to be a little more into it too. I know you weren't there, Anthony. I don't know if it translated through the broadcast or not, but typically, at the Wanderers grounds, everybody's hype once kickoff starts. But after about 5 minutes, naturally, like any other sporting event, things kind of taper off as people get settled. People do their early washroom breaks or maybe run to the concessions while the lineups are down. I kind of felt different this week. It kind of felt like the supporters really wanted to engage themselves and be that 12th man. And the players have been criticized by supporters over time, which I've always found a ridiculous criticism, but it is what it is. That sometimes they kind of play to the crowd a little bit too much, that maybe the focus needs to just strictly be on the field, ignore us. But we know that we've got guys on this team and throughout that starting lineup that feed off of our energy, that feed off of our commitment, that feed off of our noise. So from an aside from what I saw tactically, I just thought emotionally and the aura of the game felt really different. It also kind of had that fog hanging over it. We've never beaten York in the Labor Day Classic. York always brings their best to the Wanderers grounds. We know the season was on the line for better or worse. They played with that nothing to lose mentality. And that to me was the one thing that really stuck out and kind of, I know we're going to talk about the second half here on the other end of this little rant that I'm going on, but it kind of sort of, I suppose, lasted through halftime. The second half kind of dropped off a little bit. I think, like you said, it was a little cagier off the air. But I felt like that emotion and that aura and that energy kind of kept going. And it sounds so silly to talk about in a season where X's and O's has been the predominant discussion. But I kind of felt like emotionally the boys were up for this one, and it kind of showed face.
Yeah, like you could definitely see even like from watching on TV, the crowd was definitely up for it. I'm not I don't understand that. If a player's using the crowd to G themselves up and kind of get themselves going, have at it. That's what we're there for, right? And it's kind of I don't understand anybody why anybody would have a problem with that. But I just kind of wanted to just touch on a little bit, just popped into my head there. So, you know. Why do you think we have these indifferent starts to games? So, like this one, I know this is like a kind of loaded question, and I don't want to like you to obviously like throw you under the bus or like throw a loaded question at you, but it has been such um, a, a kind of major part of like how our season's kind of been all over the place. That we have a start like this. I think when we played Vancouver away, we were like on it, and then we have other games where we just kind of like just sit back and we're not like against Ford. I think the last one we played Ford, we just kind of went really on it. It's kind of odd, isn't it? Like, so do you think that's like a management thing, or is that just the players, or is that like an on-field thing? What do you think?
Knowing the lads in charge, you hate to blame preparation. And I'm not blaming preparation and even leading with this, but it's what the general fan base will blame. And, however fair or unfair that is to Patrice, Jed, Jordy, Jan, and all the backroom staff, it becomes the very easy out. It becomes the very easy excuse. And the last thing you want is for the supporters to be down your neck over things that are controllable. That kind of thing, like I said, I've been the wind all year about matching energy, matching energy, matching energy. We've also seen times this season where early in the game, the pendulum shifts for whatever reason, be it an injury, a red card, some kind of tactical imbalance. Something that was really, really evident during the Stephen Hart era. As much as I love Stephen, his plan B was a very, very difficult thing for him to refer to. We're starting to see Patrice's stubbornness kind of lay off a little bit. I know you said loaded question. I don't want to get in trouble. I
Yeah.
love Patrice. I'm not saying stubbornness in a bad way, but we talked about the 3-4-3 at the start of the year and how when it clearly wasn't working, he still kind of kept going, kept pushing, kept trying. I think the reason why we start slow is kind of a little bit of that. What we've seen teams like Cavalry and Forge do over these last 6 years, to Tommy and Bobby's credit, is 5-10 minutes into the game, they have an adjustment, they have a tweak, they have something to shift, that if they do get off to a slow start, they can at least find a way to balance themselves back into the game. And in Cavalry's case, we've even seen them use physicality as that kind of tool. They'll take a yellow card 10 minutes into a game just to kind of shake up a midfield that might have a little bit too much possession, for example. And I'm not saying that it's an under preparation thing on our staff's behalf, because it's very easy to see what's working in training. And it's very easy to see what's been successful through routines and want that to work. So when after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, if it's still not working, maybe you remember it in practice. It took the boys 10, 15 minutes to get this. Let's give them another 10, 15 minutes. And I think it's more burdened and more heavy this year because of how the season has gone. I think if we are in a position like a Forge or a Cavalry, for example, the slow starts aren't quite as highlighted and they don't feel quite as damaging to the entire body of work because, as we look at things, we've got X amount of games left, but we're counting down minutes now. Like
Yeah.
we're literally getting to the point where we're counting down minutes to the season. So those slow starts, we almost can't afford them anymore. So I was a little bit impressed and a little bit intrigued with how Patrice wanted to start fast against York. I think it's hopefully an example of what's to come going forward, not being scared, I guess, and playing to their toes, not backing off. And I know we're going to talk second half here in a bit. We did kind of revert a little bit and got a little bit cagier, but we've been, I'm trying to think of the right word. We've had a tendency, I suppose, to revert when that plan A kind of falls apart and not try to find a way to adjust to keep that plan A in the mix.
It's a great answer. Yeah, it's just something that kind of popped into my head, and I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on it. So, kind of keeping the team like I back to a little bit of positivity, like as we all mentioned, like we just never gave York time on the ball. Like we were kind of buzzing around their players. I think we were getting stuck in as well. I mean, like I think it was Max Ferrari and Fernandez had an ongoing battle. Guzman and Ferrazzo were at it and stuff like that. So there was like lots of like little mini battles all over the pitch, which was great to see, and like it's a part of football that I love. But I kind of wanted to just touch a little bit on Sean Rea. Like, when he had played like a cameo the last time I think that we had a show, and obviously he's had time to kind of play some full games and stuff like that. But it just seems that it's still not kind of there's something not quite clicking for him, and I'm sure it's like match rustiness, but like the player that we saw when he was playing for Valor and for Montreal, like he had two opportunities in this game to lay the ball off to somebody, and he just kind of took the wrong option. So you think that that's what it is? It's just trying to fit in with new teammates. He's trying to do too much, maybe because he's like obviously we've put so much trust in him to try and get us to the playoffs. What do you think it is that kind of that's just not. Like he's still playing well, don't get me wrong. It was just that little next level thing that we all know he's capable of.
That's the human element, like you said, fitting in, new environment, new teammates. If things went his way entirely, he wouldn't be a wanderer. So it's not even so much is he totally invested, is he totally committed? That's not my question at all. I have no questions about that at all. In fact, it seems the opposite. It seems like he's been almost pleasantly surprised by what we've been able to present and what we've been able to offer as a supporter base as well as a club. You come to Halifax, temporary stadium, you don't think much of the facilities and stuff until you get here, and you're like, okay, they've done a great job of this. So, he's in the preliminaries of life changing situation. Like he's committed to next season contractually. He's coming into a situation where it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows. Like you said, Anthony, not even so much that we were putting too much on him pressure wise, but you're kind of being anointed as a savior. This season hasn't been great. We've needed something to shake things up. Somebody like him, knowing what he has quality wise, his pedigree in this league, his reputation in this league, it was very easy for us to just get ahead of ourselves. But what we saw in that first appearance was just about everything we were expecting.
Yeah,
So the timing of the road trip, I think, also plays a part. These guys are professionals, so it's a terrible excuse to an extent. But for him to come to Halifax, get settled, play his first game, and then go on the road for 2 weeks almost. That's not easy either. You know, that expectation again. I'm going to probably bring it up a few more times before the season is out when it comes with Rea. I'm not really looking for the full package until next season. Obviously, it would be great to get peak Sean Rea this year because it would go a long way to get us into the playoffs. But, you know, I think the writing on the wall and the fine print with him signing on for the 1+, was that this is a 2 or year and a half type project type thing. This is the guy we're going to build around next year. Maybe personnel wise with his teammates, he's not quite finding those telepathic levels and stuff that he had when he was in Winnipeg, when he was playing with players with much less skill and talent, to be completely honest and not rude. But, you know, we're just being honest here. He had to be that guy in Winnipeg, and he almost shined because of it. Coming into Halifax, even though, like I said, us supporters see him as that savior, his teammates are looking at him almost as like, you're the new guy. This is how we play. You kind of got to fit in rather than we're going to follow this guy's lead. And I'm not saying that that's actually what's happening. It's just kind of a theory of what I've seen in the past happen with other teams professionally and at amateur level. So I think that it's not something for us to worry about or panic, even if this kind of, and like you said, he's playing well. It's not like it's poor
Yeah.
form. It's just not that level. Like you said, I wouldn't panic if he doesn't quite hit that level come November. Come April, May, June next year, if we're not quite seeing Sean Rea, what the name represents, then I would be a little bit concerned.
Okay. Yeah, I just I'm sure it's been tough for him kind of there's kind of been a bit of a whirlwind couple of weeks for him, come to Halifax, as you said, like going out on a awful road trip, and then trying to get his life settled. So I saw your tweet today about that it's criminal that Zach Fernandez didn't make the CPL team of the weekend. I kind of I don't think I appreciate it until I read your tweet, like, that like he was playing a position really because he's not a left back, he's a right back or he's a right winger. So the fact that he was playing that role, because normally you'd kind of expect Roy Ferrazzo to be on that wing because that's kind of normally where he plays. But just before we get on to Zach, I did kind of want to just mention, like, just get your thoughts on Riley. Like, we don't always get to see him in these advanced positions, but the quality of his final ball was exceptional. Like we saw it for the Farron goal, obviously, but some of the crosses that you bring, was that something that we knew he had in his locker, or was it surprise you as much as it surprised me?
Definitely surprising me a little bit. We kind of know he's a Swiss Army knife, but when you see a player that is good at everything show greatness in certain things, it does kind of take you aback because it's like, how does this guy have time to work on this part of his game when his whole game is being worked on daily, right? So, you know, talking to Patrice last year about Riley, because obviously Patrice has coached Riley, I don't know how long time, very long time. He said that was one of the things about him that's going to surprise the fan base. And it took me back to Zach Secunda, Matteo Restrepo, these guys that we've had, Jake Ruby, guys that can fit different roles and different positions from the defensive end. But typically, guys that fit into different roles defensively don't have those attacking qualities or attributes. Like that's why they're able to play multiple defensive positions because they're good defensively. Their foot, their style, how they play, that doesn't necessarily matter if they're able to defend well. So in Riley's case, I think it's maybe not so much a surprise. I know I kind of contradicting myself a little bit when I say this, as much as it's kind of counter to where we've had success this season. When he's slotted into the midfield, he was becoming a bridge that we didn't have. When we were having issues at right back, he kind of stepped up and stepped in when Zach was a little bit out of form. Now we're seeing him play left back with Wesley. We know he can play left back. It's just kind of his natural position, but he hasn't really been rolled in there a lot this season. He's kind of been all over the place. So, you know, he would be excused to maybe be off for a game or two. But as far as I was concerned and as far as I saw, he hit the ground running again. And there were some questions about his form over the last couple of games. But again, like that's what I was just talking about. He seemed to just be kind of thrown in to fill a role later in the match as a substitute or being put into a position because of an injury that had popped up during the game. But in this case, with the preparation and with the time, I think it worked. It worked to a
Yeah.
T. They were, and I know we're going to talk about Zach, but when him and Zach were changing the flanks, it was kind of confusing Ottawa defensively at times because they were seeing one high, one low, and then all of a sudden both are high, and then both are high, and then they cut across the field, and then they switch flanks. That little tool, that little trick, even at this level, can put that tiny bit of doubt in a defender's mind. And on the goal, the Farron goal, that's essentially what happened. Is as Riley kept dragging and Telford was dropping deep, it created that 1-2. When that 1-2 happens, there's your crossing lane. You know, credit to the cross. It was an absolute fucking peach. But the build up to that play, you don't even need to necessarily have a good person on the end of that to make that cross happen. That's how beautiful the build up was. But it
Yeah.
was all Riley. It was all Riley. So surprised Anthony, surprised that he's so good at so much, I suppose would be the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, I think we kind of have this impression of him as a stopgap, kind of like, somebody's out injured, put Roddy Ferrazzo in there. And I think it's not fair on him in some ways. I like, he doesn't get a chance to play his preferred position and actually show people what he's actually capable of. Because he does a really, as you mentioned, he does a really good job, and whatever job he's asked to do, he does it well. He just goes, and you kind of normally don't s- pick him out for any reason because he just does his job. Whereas I thought in this game he was actually given a little bit more of a free range, actually shows what he's all about. And I think that that cross for Ferran was phenomenal. I thought Ferran had a really good game, but I don't think he. This sounds terrible, but I don't think he deserves to be in the team of the week this week. I think like him, like Ferrazzo or Fernandez, I think deserve to be there ahead. And I think they have a tendency if you score a goal, they'll put you in, which whatever they get up to. So yeah, just in commentary, they kind of mentioned part of the struggles that we've had this year is that Lorenzo has had zero goal contributions this year, and Zach as well has had no goal contributions, and obviously he changed that in this game with his goal. But overall, like you saw that goal meant to him, and like he ran to the crowd, he was giving it all, and then you just saw him go back in himself and just like let out a big fucking scream. You could see it was just a kind of a weight physically just going off his shoulders. But this was probably probably his best game of the season. What were your thoughts on it?
His emotion is palpable. So he plays with his heart on his sleeve. I mean, we were talking about, players getting the fans into the game and vice versa, how energies can match. It's normally commonplace. Whenever Zach is frustrated, we see it, we feel it, we get frustrated with him. It's that boat. You're on the waves. And with Zach, it's a passion. It's when he's playing great, their smiles are wider. When he's playing poor, the anger is deeper. So to see that yell that you were talking about, mom got a wonderful picture of it. I hope that she posts it on Facebook. You could see a month or longer of frustration just getting released. And we've talked about Zach's future with the club. We've talked about, interest in him. Josh Healy had a wonderful, wonderful interview with Matt Fegan, where Matt basically said the quiet part out loud about Nimick, Kale, and Zach. And, we may talk about Dan on another show. I don't know if we're going to talk about Dan today with some of the bloopers this season, but you have to feel for these guys with the pressure on their shoulders too, knowing that they're scouts and that every action that you're doing on the field is filmed and is going to be referenced to a talent agent or different clubs that might be interested in you. I get that. But with Zach, it doesn't feel like he's playing for that next move. It doesn't feel like he's playing for the next step of his career. It seems like every time he's on the field, he's playing for that moment, that now. And I know it sounds silly, but in this league, it's very easy to understand why a player would get complacent. This isn't a career league. We want these guys to move on. We want these guys to do better. We want these guys to make more, fulfill their dreams. One day, someday, maybe the Canadian Premier League will be that dream. But for now, it is what it is. It's a development spot. It's a place for these guys to platform their talent and hopefully find that next step. Zach doesn't let that burden hold him back. And what we saw yesterday, like you said, his performance of the year for sure, probably one of his statement performances of his Wanderers career so far, in my opinion. And I think it's because of that. And I'm going back to the very beginning of our chat, that emotion. The season's on the line. He's one of those veteran guys that have been here for a few years. He's seen the highs, he's seen the lows. He wants to put the team on his back and carry us as far as he can. And that moment that you were talking about, Anthony, just that unleashing of emotion. That's an image I won't forget for a long time. I hope he's here forever. I was even saying on Twitter, like, we don't want him to be here for 4, 5, 6 more years. We want him to find his dream. But if he is here, he's the type of guy that we want to cheer for. And we're the type of supporters that he wants to play for. And that's what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the interview with Matt Fegan, like kind of saying that these guys had uh offers come along, obviously stuff didn't work out, and they're kind of rolling into that kind of last bit of their contract too, right? So obviously that's in the back of their mind too, that has the Wanderers put contract options on the table for them? Are they going to wait till the end of the season? And we've kind of seen how that's happened before, where Alex the Carolers kind of got shafted a little bit. You know what I mean? So like I kind of I do get it. And you're definitely right. Like I mean, like that whole performance, he was not thinking about, oh, who's watching me. All he cared about was the fans that were there and making sure that we got the win. So yeah, it was a tremendous performance, and I love seeing that man. The passion that he had, and it's just yeah, that's part of the reason why we love the games. I mean, those moments. I mean, it's just you know, it's kind of just a very human. Uh, you know. In that moment, I don't think anybody else mattered in the whole stadium. It was just his own like little, and we were just lucky enough to be able to witness it. So yeah, that's why I love football. So obviously, you know, I'm trying to say like it was a very positive first half. I think we outplayed York massively. Like Mo Billy is probably like, the worst I've seen him play in quite a long time. He was misplacing passes. You could see he was getting kind of frustrated. A couple of their players were kind of getting frustrated too. They obviously did have a couple of moments like that in the first half too. I think Austin Reese had one or two like really good chances, but kind of the second half we kind of started. Uh, no, Let's go back to the energy thing you were talking about. We didn't have that same intensity when we came out the second half, and thank God we got the second goal. But we kind of allowed York back into the game, and Gary's kind of said on the podcast before where you're never going to control a game for 90 minutes. That's just a fact of life. But we just seem to like from all that emotion and all that kind of support and all that kind of stuff, it kind of just felt like they wilted a little bit, and obviously. Ben Moore is not like a fly-by-night coach. He's actually a really good coach, and I think he made some tweaks, made some changes, and they were definitely coming into it, especially when they got the goal. But overall, I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on like obviously the substitutions that we came on and what difference they kind of made to try and stop that the kind of onslaught that we had for like 10, 15 minutes, and how impressed you were that like we were out even after the own goal, how we were able to kind of just get through it.
That's the part that I was going to actually start with, was like they saw it through. So obviously it doesn't make for good podcasting to say that they saw it through. Let's move on to the next topic, because that's not how it works. And
Yeah.
the way this season has gone, we have to analyze these situations because there has been a repetition at times this year. We've seen that Forge game is the one that stands out the most to me. When you were up with us in the box, that dreariness, but we had that game. That game was in the palm of our hands, and we just let Poku go. The fear and the worry, and it's totally a weird off topic, on topic, but like I always joke, the reason Ottawa and Wanderers fans are so similar is because we have a fear of history repeating itself in a very, very different way, of course. And that's kind of what it was feeling like. And we know the history of York on Labor Day specifically, but just in general at the grounds, they always kind of bring that A game. So I don't disagree with you. You're 100% right. The second half, York played better. In a weird way, I actually didn't find that we took our foot off of the gas as much. I feel like we actually kind of carried a little bit of the first half into the second half. In fact, I think that's part of the only reason why we got 3 points, because there were some attacks very early in the second half. And like you said, that 10-15 minute onslaught where it looked like York were going to equalize like that. We still had that tenacity. We weren't leaving guys open. We were giving up some bad fouls. And that was where I was actually kind of a little bit worried, was that we were going to give up that set piece, which always seems to deflate the boys. But I actually kind of thought that we came out into the second half with something, but York did a good job matching it. And I'm glad that you mentioned giving more credit for making those tweaks. Martin Nash was always a great manager for creating a base and kind of allowing his players to do what they can do. And I also think that's part of the reason why they let him go, because I think ownership wanted somebody that was a little more structured and that the players would be more attentive to. And I was kind of watching, because it's the first time I've seen him coach. So I'm the nerd in me was kind of watching their bench at times. And he was a really, really personable and energetic coach. I saw him talking a lot to the fourth official, but not
Yeah.
in a negative sense. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. He was understanding the flow of the game. Fouls were happening. He wanted to get an explanation, but obviously didn't want to bother the referee. And I watched him talking to his center backs a lot. The fella that had the matchup with Telfer, it's terrible that his name is completely eluding me, but almost every dead
Is it
play.
Leon? Leon? Is that guy?
Leon, that
Yeah.
guy, yeah. Oh, he's a great player, great
Yeah.
player. Him and Telfer, their battle was exceptional. But I noticed that almost every single time that there was a dead play or the ball was on the other side of the field, he's looking at that bench, and he's either waving his arms like this, or he's screaming something, or sticking his thumb up almost as if to say, that's exactly what I wanted last set. York's future is bright because that base of communication that they showed is the reason why they got into the game in the second half. I think that in a weird way, and this sounds silly because he's not new to the league, he's been here for a few months now, but this being his swan song, his foray into the Wanderers grounds, it kind of shakes your core a little tiny bit. It makes you kind of I don't want to say overanalyze or overmanage, but maybe just maybe we got into his head a little bit early on in the match, and he was overthinking some of the things that he wanted to implement. And I know that sounds silly, but we've seen it happen with players. Some guys love to play here, some guys get shook. That can happen from a coaching perspective too. So I don't expect a York team to come to the Wanderers grounds under his tutelage and be that a little standoffish as they were in the first half. Martin Nash used to come in here and just basically tell those boys, do what you need to do. And they always seem to find a way. So, but yeah, long story short, I do see where you're coming from, Anthony, and I do agree. I don't think we played to our potential the second half, certainly not as well as we played in the first half. But I think a lot of credit goes to York. I think that they just found their way back into the match. And I think the boys, our boys, deserve a lot of credit for the spirit that they maintained.
I must say I was very impressed with the 16-year-old kid. He was the guy that kind of set up the own goal, the Shola Jamo, or I apologize, I'm pushing his name, but I thought he was excellent when he came on. He gave it was a nice like little set two between him and Fernandez there. I thought it was a good like little matchup, and I thought he's a really good player and he's got a bright future. But
I was I was saying to those guys, because there's not many players that come on and there's like a buzz in the crowd, but when people were starting, he's 16. He's how old? He's 16. And just to see like he played with, I'm trying to think of the right word, a freedom, but a different word. It's not, freedom isn't quite the word, because you could tell that he was still well structured. I mean, him versus Zach, like you said, was a great battle. You're going to see those building blocks with that young man. That match yesterday, he'll watch that film 100 times, because the little things that he was successful with when he first came on the field, Zach adjusted very quickly. And
yeah.
then he wasn't able to have that freedom anymore, right? So, yeah, over the 6 years of just kind of substitutions or people coming on the field, getting to see players play live. Yeah, you said it. He came on and there was a little bit of a buzz in the crowd, and yeah, he well beyond his years. Very mature player.
It's another sign though, like for 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 all the things that people say about York, they are very good at finding talent, and he's another one that just seems to be like he just seems like if you're like watching like a Sunday league game, that's kind of what I felt like. He's just coming and just playing and didn't give a shit about like what was going on around him, and he just got on the pitch and did his stuff, and I thought he was really good. But yeah, just kind of getting back to our team, I think when Thiago Coimbra came on, he kind of gave us a little bit extra again because like that chap just runs his box off. There's a couple of times there when they were kind of passing the ball back and he kind of forced the keeper into a couple of errors and stuff like that just by sheer like will, So like, he's such a good guy to have. Like if he's not coming off from the start, like having him to come on and just kind of, when you come towards the end of the game and your defender's a little bit tired, he's an absolute nightmare to have come on and play against you. It's great to. I love watching him play.
Yeah, and we're seeing his development and his maturity happen in real time because just a couple of months ago we're talking about a petulance still being there, still kind of not, I don't want to say ego, it's a terrible word, but not channeling that energy properly. And all we've seen since he's come back from his injury now, I think this is his third appearance, is just that, Anthony, kind of that, not reservation, obviously, because like you said, he's running his ass off. He's getting to those channels. He almost caused the goalkeeper to turn the ball over, like you were talking about. And the second time, the goalie actually took that extra touch because he was like, shit, he's going to come at me. And when he didn't, Thiago actually kind of like did a 1-2 to try to guess which way the keeper was going to pass the ball. So he was playing mind games with the keeper off the ball as it was too. So those little things, the maturity. Previously, he would just be running at the ball like a dart, and it would be easily played around him. And then he's wheeling back 20, 25 yards, and then that ball gets passed back, and then he's wheeling another 20, 25 yards. And we know he's got lungs, but everybody's human. You eventually you kind of run out of that. It doesn't matter how much determination you have, you run out of that energy, you run out of that cardio. So seeing him using that bull more wisely, more strategically, seeing him thinking about the action rather than doing the action and then thinking, oh, what did I do after the fact? Like, I don't think he gave up a foul. And if he did, actually, he gave up one and it was a bad call. And that's what Joey, who sits a couple seats down from me, was saying. He would normally come on and have 3 or 4 fouls. Two of them would just be kind of stupid, like 80 yards away
Yeah,
from, right? But he only had one, and it was literally the attacking side of the field, the end line, 80 yards from our net. And it wasn't even a foul. It was just the York player flopped. So I actually am really glad that you brought him up because I have him on my notes as kind of a special mention. That his little cameo actually went a long way. We don't have a lot of those types of bodies. And, being one down now with Valesky being gone, his ability, Coimbra's, to provide that energy at the tip, uh, it's you saw the proof, you saw the value, and we're going
yeah.
to need that in the run in now to get into the playoffs. We might be in situations with a 1-goal lead. We don't need Coimbra to come on to score goals. We need Coimbra to come on to shake things up. And yesterday was a great example.
So I just wanted to get your who you thought would be your man in the match. For me, I'd probably go like we talked about him there. I thought it was a great performance by Roy Ferrazzo, so I'd probably give it to him. But how about yourself?
Zach for me. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Like every time your man of the match pick would always be like my 1B. You know what I mean? Like Zach and Riley, we're talking about both of their games being so great, but both of those guys don't have great games without each other. So I think it's very fair to say that both of those guys can kind of share that man of the match, regardless of who you pick, because I think that the way that Riley was kind of dragging the line, the way that Zach was finding internal chant, like I think it was Jordan was saying that they've been begging, or Zach has been begging for them to let him get into the box for corners. And this is the first time all year that he had the assignment, and look what happens, right? So
Yeah,
just seeing how, even though they're playing on opposite sides of the field, how much they actually kind of benefit off of each other. I think that's really unique. Those two for sure. The honorable mentions, the other guys in the team of the week. Farron, like you said, maybe shouldn't be in the team of the week, but I thought he had a really good game after a couple of not Farron-esque games. And Telfer was like in a weird way, quietly superb. The way that he was holding up the ball,
Yeah.
the way he was frustrating York's back line. And he was a big part of that Zach Fernandez goal too. His patience is something that's a surprise for me this year. We've seen him have that ability to just put his head down and put his foot through the ball and score. He could have got frustrated at times yesterday as well and kept his cool. We've seen him be a hothead at other clubs. Yeah, so those guys all deserve great mention. But honestly, everybody yesterday, and it's kind of nice to say that we haven't had too many games this year where you could say all 11 men did their job, and I really firmly believe that all 11 men did their job yesterday.
Yeah, I think kudos to Ron Telfer for not punching Leon in the face after he grabbed him by the dick, or the balls, wherever part of his anatomy he grabbed him by, because that looked really fucking painful. I just before I let you go, I kind of had like a little bit of a perusal of the questions that you guys got, and thank you obviously to everybody who sent one in, and didn't get a chance to do it, like life got in the way. But there was one that kind of popped out, and I kind of just wanted to ask get your opinion on it, because it is kind of relevant. So, if I this is from Bishopville Red. If I was an under 21 player in Canada, how much attention would I pay to Halifax Wanderers recruiters? None of 0%. More importantly, how does the refusal of the staff to play under 21s affect the club's rep? I think that's a really good question.
Very good question. There's two ways to kind of look at it. On one hand, the club has done a pretty good job opening that pathway. Jed Davies has come to the club and has kind of followed up what Mesut Mert had started a few years ago as he was working with Stephen Hart and kind of trying to develop a reserve slash under 21 slash B team project, which originally was a Matt Fegan passion project turned into this could actually bear fruit. The club deserves a lot of credit for that. The criticisms, obviously, of the under 21 minute situation, the lack of youth players playing from season one. I mean, the Yusuf thing is a joke, a long running meme that will last in Wanderers lore forever. But I think one of the biggest criticisms I had of Stephen Hart from that first year was that that young man didn't get a minute on the field. And he wasn't the only young player that played for Stephen that didn't see time. Fast forward to now, I love Patrice, and again, I love Stephen too, but Gavis was here for 2 years, and for him to not see the field when he, as far as I had seen in training, was proving himself to at least get like an end of game role. I was feeling frustration as a supporter. So to answer the question, if I am 16, 17, 18 years old and I'm looking at the 8 CPL clubs and I look at where the opportunities lie for me to develop, Halifax has that platform with their under 21, with a coaching staff that seems to care about the development of youth. At the same time, I see next to nothing for first team minutes. And we see teams playing. York just put a 16-year-old on the field. Vancouver, for all their coaching ineptitudes, they've got young players in their system. Cavalry haven't been scared to bring in 1 or 2 teenagers a year. We seem to almost have this weird wall. And it obviously doesn't totally exist because we've had young players from all across the country here anyways. But because Halifax hasn't had that kind of development, because Nova Scotia doesn't quite have that kind of platform, sans Jacob Schaffelberg, before what the Halifax Wanderers have done has come to life, that stigma was already there. So I think what we've done as a club, albeit a great job of creating pathways for under 21 players, we've almost kind of added to that stigma that kids from Nova Scotia can't make it. I hate to say it in a blunt way like that because again, the club's done a great job of giving these kids that are from here and from the all Atlantic provinces that opportunity. But if I'm from out of province and even in province, I'm not looking at this club as a club that's going to give me the opportunity professionally. However, I will look at this club as a club that will give me the opportunity to get to the opportunity to be a professional. I don't know if that makes any sense,
Oh, it
but
does.
we've seen, yeah, because we've seen players come to the club that have gone on to play college soccer at a high level. Even in the case of Scott Firth, for example, he spent 3 years with the club professionally, but he's gone on to get an education now. He's with the suburban system, which is about to maybe take that semi-pro step. So it's a double-edged sword. I think we're sharpening the right side by developing these under 21, under 18 programs, keeping these young guys tabbed in, actually putting a few into the first team system and setup. But I think that we're also kind of sharpening the other edge of that sword by not playing these kids, especially in a season where we're criminally low on under 21 minutes and we're in last place.
Yeah.
So if we're not going to do it now, when? And I think that, like you said, Anthony, and Bishop, which is a great question. Right now, if I'm a young player, I'm putting this club on my blacklist.
Yeah, so for like I think what we've traditionally done is that we would have one player that we would use for the majority of our minutes. Like when Zach was came here first, I think he was in under 21. We kind of had that. Obviously, Coimbra we tried to use for the majority of our under 21 minutes. That's kind of the way we've gone about it. Whereas I think other clubs tend to, they're really good at using the developmental contracts or, like even with Fords who have like had so many of the same players from year one still playing in the first team, they've always been able to supplement them with like younger players like Quasi Poku and stuff like that. Whereas for us, it's almost like that we're kind of thinking, okay, we're going to put our best team out, try and get to the playoffs, and then we'll worry about doing the 21 minutes. So I think that was kind of the way it felt to me like last year. Anyway, it was like let's get the job done, and then we'll worry about doing the 21 minutes. And I think it's kind of we've kind of got ourselves into a corner right now where we need points on the board to get to the playoffs, and we don't have time to allow another 21 player to come in and like we need our best players out there. I think that we do have like I think that Vasconcelos is a excellent player, and I think he could have got more time. I think Aiden Rushnas was an easy one for us to pick up minutes. Like I think Jan is an amazing goalkeeper. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that we needed to use him because I mean the game where Rushnas deputized, I thought he was excellent, and it proved he can do it at this level. Jefferson Alphonse obviously he kind of feels like he's going to be somebody who's going to bring us minutes, but obviously he had a little bit of an injury. And it's just, you know, the reason why I'm kind of talking about it now too is because I know Gary fucking hates talking about it, and I get it, but it's once again, it's getting to that business end of the season where we can't ignore it any longer. Like, every other, like most of the other teams are, it's not even. They're not even worrying about it. They're over their minutes and away they go and just have to worry about the games that are coming up. And it just seems like we tend to do a kind of arse ways where we're like, we got ourselves into a hole where we didn't win for so long. And it's like, it was a matter of, well, we can't just throw kids in now for the point of like just trying to get minutes. Like we need to win games. And now we're still trying to get to playoffs. And it's like, obviously we don't trust a Vasconcelos to start the game, or we don't trust Fushnas to be in goal. And I'm not trying to be harsh, like I'm really not, but I just think that it's kind of it's just getting. I can sense fans getting frustrated with it because you see it on some of the forums, and you can kind of see where um like we're starting to stress about it again, and it shouldn't be something that we should be stressing out about. The whole point of the minutes is to it's to give because this is what the league is supposed to be about is having kids like Shola, Jamal, and Camilo Vasconcelos being on the pitch and making a difference and learning their trade. And I don't think that just going to training and being around the first team squad kind of is enough. But that's my 2 cents on it. But yeah, I'm just kind of flip back to a
Real,
happier. Yeah,
real
go
quick
ahead.
though,
Yeah,
just really quick. I've actually like I've been a proponent of they need to change the system where you need to have an under 21 player on at all times. And I know it sounds like overkill, but it kills two birds with one stone.
yeah,
Every team complies. Youth players get a guaranteed opportunity. And I said two birds with one stone, but I guess it kind of kills three birds with one stone. And it's more minutes. I'm
yeah,
not great at math, but if you do 90 times 28, it's more than 2,000. So to me, logically speaking, we're almost it sounds kind of funny. We're almost giving an example here in Halifax as to why these minutes are more of a burden than
yeah,
they are a benefit for our youth players. And it sucks to say it that way. Like we're the ones that are being the assholes and not playing the kids. But we're also proving and showing that, yes, this is a development league, but at the same time, this is also a professional Premier League. This minute restriction is more of a burden than something that could be literally more concrete, more beneficial, and much much easier for teams to manage. Jess Wadham actually, she came up with a cool idea. It was that every lineup has an under 21 player, you're starting 11, and then you have to have at least two players on the bench that are under 21. So if under 21 kid gets hurt, there's at least one on the bench for you to replace him with. And then it can come to a point where you can actually put on a second under 21 player or a third under 21 player, and that stacks the minutes. You keep a minutes restriction, but you make it so a team has to have minimum X amount of minutes. And I think it's the best and the smartest way to do it. Like we've seen now for 2 seasons, whether it's stubbornness or just a lack of actual recruitment of finding players that are under 21, but it's a burden and it's not going to benefit young players if it's a burden.
yeah,
You said it, like if we get to a point where in the last game of the season and we still need 500-600 minutes, it's not healthy for the development of a Camillo or Aiden Rushness to put them in a game where it's do or die for the whole season when the whole season they've basically kind of been put on the back burner,
yeah.
right? So yeah, again, love Patrice, love Steven, just really haven't been the biggest fan of how we've treated development/youth players over the last few years.
Yeah, and like the funny thing is that like Patrice has a record of bringing players through. Like I mean, like it's one of like the best things that he did at Vaughan, and I that's the thing. I think that's a really good way of putting it. That it's a burden when it's not supposed to be. It was supposed to be something that's uh, it's supposed to be a leg up for young kids in the league, and as you said, it kind of feels like a burden, which like
And
it's not the
and
way
for
it's.
the and for the teams too, because you know how the business works. If you develop young talent and young talent becomes something, you sell them.
Yeah,
Like Quasi Poku, I don't know how much he was sold for, but they're talking about it being a league record. In terms of hard cash, Forge's salaries next year are almost paid for now.
yeah,
That's because they developed a young player, found a spot for him, and you know Cavalry and Forge have the benefits of having a Sigma and Foothills, of course. Like there's no, I'm being critical again. I'm actually talking about the stigma of how Nova Scotia doesn't have those core academies. They don't have those core bases. You hope that at some point in time, that's part of the Wanderers' MO, not just a passion project or something that, you know, because there's some extra bucks in the operations costs, we might as well run this program too. It should be a part of this the standard. And Derek has talked about like how what was the his dream, was it 5 or 6 local players on the roster
yeah.
by 10 years or something? Like I could be talking out my ass, but it's something like that. I'm seeing zero progress towards that, even though we've had Kieran Basket, Christian Oxner, Gavis, local talent, but they don't play.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I'm sure it's
yeah.
something that we're going to be having to talk again about towards the end of the season again. But Chris, thanks for hanging out, man. It's been great catching up, and really appreciate all your thoughts on the game. And
Was a blast, brother. Was a blast. Welcome home.
yeah, thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
performance.